All right, I think we're ready to start. Okay, if we could go to the communication slide. And Tom, are you covering that?
I got this one,
Oh,
Dr. Payment.
cool. Awesome.
Um, all right, well, Tate Pine Oikalo, good day, everyone. Inuenekisa Himumukata, Inamunekwas Julia Keith. My name is Himumukata. It means she calls out from on high, but I go by Julia Keith. I'm a member of the Nez Perce tribe, and I'm going to talk you through some of our technical the technical side of this presentation. Welcome, welcome. The presentation slides will appear in the main window, while the speaker will appear in the top corner. At the bottom of your screen is a menu bar. Here you will find the chat, raise hand, Q&A, and closed caption functions. Please use the chat box to report any technical issues you are experiencing. We will respond to these concerns as they come in. Next to the chat box is the raised hand feature. You're able to use this during the Q&A and comment segments to let us know when you'd like us to unmute your mic so you can speak and ask a question. Another way you're able to submit a question or comment is the Q&A box itself, where you can leave your question at any point during the webinar for the presenters to address during the open discussion at the end. Lastly, live captioning is available for today's broadcast. Simply click the CC icon to use this feature. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded for note-taking purposes. Katsiao and welcome to the call.
All right, thank you, Julia. And we would like to ask if there is a volunteer to do our opening in a good way. Just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay, if there's no objection, I'm willing to do it. I am an elected tribal leader too. So I'll jump in. Ani buju biwakajig indishnakas makwa magizi indorum bawating indonjaba anishnaabe ojibwe odawa otawatami indao. Miigwich wabanang, miigwich jawanang, miigwich ngabanang, miigwich gwenang, miigwich anoka masayak, miigwich misho ayak, miigwich aki, miigwich nabish, miigwich andodoshabo, Gawin dimindiminda miigwich ogitata miigwich ogimak. So I just gave my morning blessing, our Anishinaabe blessing, and I gave thanks to each of the directions. Introduced myself. My Indian name is Biwakajig, and it means a place where the spirits can talk through at Bawating. And I also gave thanks to Mother Earth, to our waters, water is life, to our first sustenance, which is our mother's milk. So no matter what your relationship is with your mother, she brought you into this world. And also gave old prayer, Gawin Dimindamindamigwich, which is giving thanks to our ancestors. And then also gave thanks to our Ogichita, our warriors, and our Ogimak, our elected leadership. So miigwech. And with that, I would like to introduce you to our Executive Director from the National Congress of American Indians, Mr. Larry Wright.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. Aho, Ponkamoshe, Wongide, Ombade, Wiki de go, Idena Hikte, Wiblahan, Ponkamoshe, El Ashbahan, De Wanoche, Larry Wright Jr., Ijajik de Abdi, Wishti Usni Ponkabli, Wakpanik de, Wongide, Wibli Stuba, Wibli Ejubabli, there go. Adon Yonshinga, Ishage, Waujiga, Edi Dagi, Daon Wagilaga, Wiblahan. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you here today as well. My name is Larry Wright Jr. I'm a citizen of the Ponca tribe of Nebraska. My Ponca name is Buffalo Spirit, and I come from the Buffalo clan from our people. And again, I want to say thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us here today for this event as we work for Indian country to get out the vote. And we appreciate all of our partners that are involved with this as well. And you know, as a former high school government and civics teacher, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and something that is important regardless of who the citizenry is. But what I do want to share a quote that I used in my classes that I think is still pertinent today. This is an old quote, but very relevant. Bad officials get elected by good people who don't vote. And you're here on this call because of that shared importance of getting out to vote for Indian country to make a difference. On the screen, we want to recognize the area VPs from the Midwest, Northeast, and Southeast region that represent our members of the executive committee. And next, we have a special message that was recorded by the president of NCAI, Chairman Mark McCarroll.
Miyuyam. My name is Mark McCarroll, President of the National Congress of American Indians and Tribal Chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians. Welcome to NCAI's Get Out the Vote webinar series. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Snyder Act of 1924, which granted U.S. citizenship to America's first people. Voting is likely one of our most consequential constitutional rights. This webinar will serve as a vital tool for tribal leaders on how to mobilize our tribal citizens. The native vote can be the deciding vote this election. Be the margin of victory, honor the past, and prepare for the future. Thank you.
And we thank President McCarroll for taking the time to do that, to address us. I see that we want to recognize Rory Wheeler to say a few words and recognizing our youth. Rory?
Raise your hand and Tom will unmute you. Rory.
Hi, Yawi Scanogugwego. My name is Rory Wheeler. I'm a citizen of the Seneca Nation, calling in from the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe Confederacy here in East Lansing, Michigan. I am very excited to be with you all in today's webinar today. For me, I've been involved in getting out the vote since before I could even vote, because I've seen and knew how much power we have as Indigenous people, especially as young people who are not only leading today, but are going to be stepping in the shoes as the next generation of advocates, of elected leaders, not only in our tribes, but also in our local communities, in our states, and hopefully one day in the presidency. And so as young people, we have a duty and obligation to our ancestors and those who came before us to ensure that we are honoring them, honoring our families and our communities now, but also into the future, and getting out the vote. In crucial states such as Montana, in Wisconsin, Michigan, where I'm calling in from, in Arizona and Nevada, the data shows that when natives come out to vote, it does matter. The native vote is a swing vote. So I just want to encourage and thank NCAI for hosting this wonderful webinar and committing to ensuring the native vote, and especially committing and ensuring Native youth get out the vote this upcoming election. Yahweh.
Thank you, Rory. I just want to say a special thank you too to our partnership with Kaufman and Associates, and their team have been great in making these webinar series happen for us, and helping us carry this out today. And with that, I'd like to introduce the designated NCAI Get Out the Vote campaign manager, Dr. Aaron Payment. Dr. Payment.
Thank you, Larry. And just go back one slide again to the, we want to recognize our regional vice presidents. They are unable to be with us here today, but our Midwest Vice President Leonard Fineday and alternate Michelle Bodwin, and then our Northeast Vice President Lance Gums, and our alternate Rodney Butler, and then our Southeast Vice President Reggie Tupacance, and Lorianne Chasen. Lorianne, I think, attended one of the other sessions. We want to thank all of our leadership from the National Congress of American Indians. And again, go to the agenda slide. I'm Dr. Aaron Payment. I just want to share real quickly, I'm a former regional vice president for NCAI for the Midwest. The best, I shouldn't have said that, but and then also secretary for NCAI twice and first vice twice. So working with NCAI is like working with your family. We appreciate, and I want to also recognize Kaufman and Associates. We are a 100% Native woman-owned company. Our president is Joanne Kaufman, who's been in the game for over 40 years. And she likes to say we do work that matters, and she's the real deal and authentic in the work that we do. And we are grateful to be invited in to participate with NCAI. Okay, so our agenda is we're going to talk briefly about the importance of exercising our right to vote, to convince you that we are and can be the margin of victory in setting the agenda as well. Larry will circle back and talk about what a sovereignty ticket looks like, and we want to educate the candidates on what that looks like so they can compete for our vote. And then also policy issues. I'll cover policy issues that are important to tribal nations. We want to get that word out so that we can try to shape the candidates to understand it and make some promises that they'll have to fulfill once they're elected. And then we'll talk briefly about mobilizing and activating your tribal nations. We have plenty of time set aside so that we can have a tribal leader discussion. And also we'll start with tribal leaders, but I do see we have a lot of helpers and supporters and warriors on the call. So we want to hear from everybody about how we're doing, what are we hearing in this election, what could we be doing, and how can we make this most effective and helpful. Okay, next slide. So I want to talk briefly about our contract. We have a 1-month contract. It's actually done in 2 days. It's been a whirlwind of activity. And the purpose of the contract is to urge tribal nations and their citizens to register and to vote. We also want to urge Natives to vote for candidates who support the treaty and trust obligation and a sovereignty ticket. And then to appreciate the role of campaigns and elections in setting the agenda. This is our opportunity to get the word out, to give our expectations. And then again, if candidates campaign on it, hopefully they'll fulfill their campaign promises once elected, and hopefully we'll be a big part of that agenda. So our deliverables on this project are a launch video and trusted messenger videos. Our launch video is our President Mark Macaro. And then we have a lot of exciting trusted messenger videos coming, and they're with Indian celebrities. And we're also working on the Native legislators, but I think you guys are going to enjoy these. And then we also work to refresh the NCAI Native Get Out to Vote website. Larry shared that NCAI has been in this space for quite a while as a hub to pull together resources and also other efforts. And we appreciate all of the other efforts that are happening across the country. NCAI doesn't intend to replace any of that, but to help facilitate and pulling together so everybody knows of all of the efforts. So we refreshed their Get Out to Vote website. We're holding these webinars with the regions to help get the word out. We will be developing a training guide for media so that we can promote the media to cover, we're sometimes considered something else in the media, which means that they forgot about us. But we want to be more than something else. We want to be on the front of the conversation to realize that the Native vote can make the difference and we can be the margin of difference. And then also we refreshed and updated the NCAI Native Get Out to Vote toolkits. And there are many grants that are available with a very easy to apply process, and Larry will be describing that a little bit later. Okay, next slide. Okay, so a couple of rhetorical questions. Why should American Indian Alaska Natives vote? Does my vote really matter? Does voting diminish tribal sovereignty? Should I vote D for Democrat or I for Republican? Or how about, D for Democrat, R for Republican, or I for Indian? Is it too late to register to vote? How do I register? Where do I vote? And how about absentee voting? So we have all of that information we're going to cover. So when tribes signed treaties ceding nearly 1 billion acres of Indian land in exchange for provisions of health, education, and social welfare into perpetuity, our ancestors secured a commitment for funding federal programs and services forever. While these rights are generally upheld through judicial precedents, they depend entirely on who is in office. While American Indian Alaska Natives were granted citizenship 100 years ago in the Snyder Act, a guaranteed right to vote didn't come until the 1964 Civil Rights Act was enacted. To this day, we still have issues with voter suppressions and challenges. We'll talk a little bit later about Arizona and some of the efforts to suppress the vote that are happening there to suppress the native vote. But it is our solemn duty to vote, so please exercise this right. Yes, your vote matters. President Kennedy won his election in 1961 by just over 100,000 votes, or an average of 1 vote per precinct. The 2016 presidential election in Michigan was decided by just over 10,000 votes. The number of Native Americans in Michigan in 2020 is about 110,000. We can be the margin of victory. You get to help decide who is president and who controls the House and Senate. Let your vote be for candidates who support a tribal sovereignty ticket. Voting does not diminish tribal sovereignty. Just as most Americans can vote in local, state, and federal elections, so too can Natives, but we have another level of citizenship and representation through our vote. If you vote in favor of candidates who have a platform supporting the treaty and trust obligation, you strengthen our sovereignty. If you prioritize the impact of the federal government on our tribal sovereignty and federal funding, as Indians, we win. Who you vote for is entirely up to you. You are encouraged, however, to research the candidates and ask the tough questions of how they will serve you as an American Indian. It's not too late to register to vote. Excuse me, but this varies based on jurisdiction. We urge you to go to nativevote.org to learn how to register in your respective state, how to secure absentee ballots, or where to vote in person. All that information is there at nativevote.org. Next slide. So I want to convince you that we can be the margin. The close margins of the last 2 presidential elections suggest that the lack of a Native-focused campaign in 2016 and the courting of the Native vote in 2020 may explain how the battleground states turned from red to blue and decided the election. Data shows that the proportion of Natives is multiples greater than the win or loss margins. So if you look at this chart, Michigan was won again in 2016 by less than 0.2%, while the proportion of voters who are Native is 2.3%. Michigan was won in 2020 by 2.8%. In Arizona in 2016, the margin of victory was just over 4%, and the proportion of Natives is 16%. We are huge in Arizona. In 2020, Arizona was won by 0.3%, and we are definitely a factor. So as you can see on this map, the same battleground states are in play this year, and the polls are very tight right now, and within the margin of error. This means that the Native vote may just decide the 2024 presidential election. So if you look at each one of these states, we have the proportion that are American Indian, and then in the 2020 election, what the vote was won by. And so we absolutely, in these battleground states, and also in Colorado, can make the difference in the outcome. And again, we want to educate the candidates on our issues and have them adopt part of our platform. So then if they're elected, they will have some, hopefully, fidelity to their campaign promises, and they will support Indian country in their administrations or in their legislative seats. Okay, so with that, I want to pass it back to Larry, who's going to talk to us about what a tribal sovereignty ticket looks like.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. And as everyone knows, NCAI's official stance is a nonpartisan organization, and but we also understand the importance of having supporters of candidates regardless of their party, and that is one of the reasons why we want to set this sovereignty ticket platform. And one of the items that we're working on right now, and should be done here within the next week and available, is priorities for Indian country that we want candidates to know as we look to identify those candidates that are going to support and uphold our treaty and trust obligations, as well as making sure that we have support regardless of who's running for office, that our Native people know who to support in their respective choices. But as we talk about the sovereignty platform, we understand that the relationship between the federal government and tribal nations has been reaffirmed through Supreme Court judicial precedents, legislation, administratively through executive orders and presidential memoranda and proclamations. And that to fully honor the treaty and trust obligation in exchange for the nearly 1 billion acres of ceded Indian lands, funds appropriated by Congress in fulfillment of this great promise should be no less than advanced appropriations, mandatory rather than discretionary funding, and not subject to sequestration restrictions imposed, including OMB budget ceilings. Indian country funding should not be affected by federal funding uncertainties during budget negotiations or under what we continue to find ourselves in, the continuing resolutions. And we're coming up on another deadline with that on September 31st. Achieving the classification as mandatory funding can be a significant challenge. However, in December 2022, Congress voted on advance appropriations for the Indian Health Services funding. And we know that even that took 13 years in the making of advocacy from Indian country to make that happen. And especially moving Indian country from discretionary to mandatory and forward funding will truly honor the treaty and trust obligations. NCAI has long collaborated with tribal nations to enumerate tribal infrastructure needs and priorities. In 2017, NCAI testified that the backlog was in excess of $47.8 billion, with the breakdown as follows: $10.3 billion for IHS facilities, $12.5 billion for IHS sanitation, $1.3 billion for BIE schools, $33 billion for Indian housing, and $20 million for multi-justice centers. And while the 2021 Jobs and Infrastructure Act afforded record amounts of funding to tribes, the vast majority of our infrastructure needs remains. When we talk about land into trust, we know that a clean carcieri fix is needed now. As late as 2018, proposed rulemaking would have granted a level of assent to local government to deprioritize tribal land in trust requests. Notwithstanding the intertribal conflicts with land into trust issues, a streamlined and pragmatic process subject to less political ebbs and flows is needed. When we talk about our Sovereignty Watch and our partnership with NARF and our Supreme Court project, and while the decisive outcome in Brackeen versus Holland upheld ICWA, threats to sovereignty and jurisdiction remain. NCAI has long partnered with NARF to watchdog court proceedings for possible erosion in jurisdiction and sovereignty. The McGirt decision suggests a positive turn in honoring Indian country jurisdiction. However, the impacts of the Oliphant versus Suquamish case remain, where tribes lost authority to hold non-Indians accountable for certain crimes on tribal lands. Enactment of laws to stabilize jurisdiction are needed to protect our tribal sovereignty and ensure that there are no holes in jurisdiction. These agenda items and more establish a tribal sovereignty ticket to look for when casting your vote. Next up, Dr. Payment will share a few federal Indian policy issues of importance to our tribal voters. Dr. Payment?
Thank you, Larry. Okay, so according to the 2018 U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Broken Promises report, American Indians and Alaska Natives are more likely to live in poverty, be unemployed, experience rape or abuse, be killed by police, have an infant mortality rate of 1.6 times that of non-Hispanic whites, have low high school and college graduation rates, have the highest rates of drug and alcohol addiction, and have the highest rates of suicide among adolescents. And I realize some people would rather have an assets-based focus, but we want to make the point that we have the worst of the worst statistical outcomes, and there's a reason for that. According to the CDC, American Indian and Alaska Natives have the highest rates of heroin and opiate-related deaths. And in 2022, the CDC reported a drastic drop in life expectancy by 7 years, bringing American Indian life expectancy back to what it was 80 years ago. An investigative report launched by Secretary Holland and overseen by Asia Brian Newland shines new lights on the responsibility of the federal government's instigation of generations of historical and intergenerational trauma that explains the worst of the worst outcomes. Volume 2 of the Newland report enumerates the cost of forced assimilation at $23.3 billion in present value. Dollar per dollar, this expense is owed to tribal nations to return that which was taken in order to heal and confront the systemic impacts and outcomes of federal Indian policy. Returning native languages and cultural ID will be a necessary step towards healing the impact of historical and intergenerational trauma. And as one tribal leader shared with me previously, we expect dollar per dollar for an investment to bring back our language and cultural ID. So that's approximately 23.3 billion to bring that back. Let's talk briefly about the Affordable Care Act as a treaty obligation. The 2020 election cycle saw a commitment of expanding the ACA to states which did not accept Medicaid expansion. Since this time, the American Indian Alaska Natives residing in those states were permitted to sign up, but a means test is still used. Fully honoring the treaty and trust obligation for health suggests that qualifying American Indian and Alaska Natives for the Affordable Care Act medical expansion without regard to income and creating an IHS portability similar to the VA healthcare portability. Indian countries supported the VA healthcare portability, so hopefully we will get the same support in return. This effort for an IHS portability stands to significantly increase third-party revenues to tribal health, closing the gap between the $9 billion that is currently budgeted for Indian health services to the over $50 billion the IHS budget formulation work group has estimated is needed. So this third-party revenue can help close that gap about 1/5 of what's actually needed. So let's talk about government to government relationships and consultation. In the 2019 GAO report, they identified a significant proportion of federal agencies who have not yet established consultation policies with tribal nations. And if you remember, a presidential memo in 2021 directed all federal agencies to establish consultation policies with 90 days. I joke about be careful what you ask for, because I remember I was tribal chairperson at the time and had to do over 65 consultations within that 90 days. But executive orders or presidential memos are only as good as who sits in the Oval Office. Congressman Grijalva, to his credit, introduced the Respect Act, but it's a draft that includes some concerns expressed by tribes. Any draft bill to promulgate consultation should follow consultation with tribes, but a draft legislation representative of tribal input should proceed. Let's also talk about environmental justice and climate resilience. The ebbs and flows of who is president should not adversely impact climate resilience. Tribal nations are the first stewards of the land and natural resources. Climate change is real and should not be subjected to political ideological shifts. Vast amounts of jobs and infrastructure funds to confront environmental justice and climate resilience, including potable water and clean energy expansion, should be extended and be shielded from rescissionary efforts. Further, the backlog of Indian country infrastructural needs should be addressed with an energy independence focus. So look to these as key policy issues that impact tribal nations and support candidates who support tribes. Also want to recognize that, again, the National Congress of American Indians has long led on a policy platform. And I think Larry will talk a little bit about this more later. And we make that available at your fingertips. So just go to the NCAI website. And we have briefing papers on all of the policy issues if you need to get up to speed on it. And of course, NCAI stands ready to assist tribal leaders to do summaries or be prepared for those conversations. Okay, with that, next slide. I want to get you excited and motivated. We want to share with you some resources. And again, we encourage you to go to our refreshed Native Vote page. It's nativevote.org. There's lots of tools and resources there to help you to mobilize your tribal nation to get out to vote. You know, we have a focus of not only on you and your citizens, but also your team members. You know, we are often the largest employer wherever we're located, and we also have patrons and customers. Again, we're not partisan. We're trying to promote people to participate in the democratic process and vote. And to look to a policy platform that supports Indian country. You know, we have friends on both sides of the aisle, Tom Cole, Mark Wayne Mullins, Senator Mullins, I'm sorry, and Sharice Davids, Congresswoman Davids. And so whoever supports us, we should be looking to support them. There's a toolkit on the website for mini grants to help mobilize your citizens, potentially with direct mail or advertising, potentially with these really cool t-shirts that say "Go vote then." And I saw some the other day that I think are really funny, geared towards the next generation. And it's their tagline is "Snag the vote." And those of you who have been to powwows know what snagging means, but snag the vote. So whatever it takes to get people engaged and excited and to be on the forefront and mobilized. So please check out our website, nativevote.org, for resources that are available. And I'm going to ask Larry, our executive director, to talk about the mini grants real quick.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. Yeah, as been mentioned, NCAI has been in the civic engagement space for a couple decades now. And as we move forward in our next 80 years and looking at how NCAI can be a better partner to all of our tribal nations and our sister organizations and those in this specific space of getting out the vote in civic engagement, we wanted to make sure that we were doing everything that we could to help support that. NCAI is not looking to replace or duplicate any efforts. We really want to enhance them and elevate them, celebrate them, and share best practices. And so that's part of the effort that's behind this as well. But we all know that it takes funding to carry out and do the things that we need to do to make sure that we have adequate outreach and effective outreach. And one of the things that NCAI did last year with the approval and direction of our executive committee at the time was to create a foundation to look at new opportunities to raise funding, in this particular instance, specific to civic engagement. And with the foundation, the idea behind that was we wanted to look at what other opportunities of funding are out there. And we looked really hard at the philanthropic sector. I know many of our groups depend on grants and et cetera to carry out our activities. But when we looked at the philanthropic sector in the United States alone, over $400 billion was spent in foundation money given to charitable organizations, but less than 0.5% of that money went to Indian country. And almost every foundation that we reached out to, they did not have a platform to effectively engage tribal nations and Indian country in general. And that was the impetus behind the foundation for NCAI to help use our platform to magnify the importance of philanthropic dollars coming into Indian country. And after all, as we said earlier, 1 billion acres of our land was given up, and the revenue that this country has generated is made off of our ancestral homelands. So when we looked at that, we wanted to really create a space that would help our groups that are doing this work and help fund them, and instead of these organizations going out to 574 different tribal nations, federally recognized tribal nations, as well as all of the different groups that work in this space. We wanted to be that one stop that they could count on so that we could mobilize that funding to Indian country. And an example of that for our purpose here is on our nativevote.org website, and with the mini grants to do all the things that are on that current slide. But the mini grant process is for organizations to be able to go in and apply for funding to carry out the activities that you want to do specifically. And essentially, those that can apply are obviously tribal governments, Native-led 501c3s and C4s, and Native vote collectives and collaboration. And when we look at the different eligible projects, we really wanted to cast a wide net because many people are doing different things, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't miss anything. But those projects would include increasing civic participation, the enhanced capacity of tribal organizations, comprehensive data and analysis tools development, youth and elder engagement programs, strategic coalition building and collaboration, communication and outreach efforts, and an increased awareness of understanding Native vote rights. And as we continue to engage our partnerships to identify funding, which we're very, very pleased that we have a strong response to what we're doing collectively for Indian country. Please refer to that page and apply online, and we're collecting those applications. And as the funding continues to come in, we want to continue to push that out. We understand we have a short time frame, and we want to be very as aggressive as we can, and we don't want to hold up the work that you all are doing in many different formats. And this website is a dynamic website. We're going to continue to add to it, share best practices, elevate what's going on as different organizations come together and work together. And we want to make sure that we're getting that funding to where it's needed most. And truly, with the rest of that website, there's toolkits for different activities on that, a voter action kit, communication toolkit, and social media graphics. And so we remain vigilant in making sure that we're answering the questions and we're listening to what Indian country needs. This isn't only NCAI's point of view. We get our point of view from each and every one of you. And we want to make sure that we're elevating that, listening, and being the best partner that we possibly can. With that, Dr. Payment?
Yes. I dropped into the chat. Somebody had asked the question about some data, and the Commission on Civil Rights published in 2018 the Broken Promises Report, and I've got to do a shout out to the National Congress of American Indians for instigating that. Originally, the Quiet Crisis Report, which goes back to 2003, and it took a while to get them to do a follow-up. But the latest data in one single source across the spectrum of different measures is in the Broken Promises Report. So the PDF is attached. I encourage everybody to download it and use it to reference. It's one of the best ways for us to explain that we do have the worst of the worst outcomes that ties back into historical and intergenerational trauma. And then I also urge you to Google, I'll drop it in the chat as we have a conversation, both volumes 1 and 2 of the Department of Interior investigative report on the boarding schools. It's also called the Newland Report, and it's the best 2 reports that I've ever seen with recognizing the role of the federal government and very specifically the tactics that were used to strip us of culture and language and our very identity. And that's where the historical trauma plays in. But I'll drop those into the chat as well. We do see a question, where are the Snag Vote t-shirts? We will link those. We talked to the group that did those yesterday. We will link those on our travel website on the nativevote.org. Not only those, but all kinds of shareware and information that's available. And so, yeah, we'll do that. So next slide. So now we're at that part of our meeting where we want to open it up. Let me open first, and raise your hand. President Holsey, who is our longtime NCAI partner, regional vice president. She was alternate when I was regional vice president. She was treasurer of NCAI and also played a really key role in the 2020 election in turning her state from red to blue. So President Holsey.
Kolamasi, thank you so much. Aaron and Indian country, it's a pleasure to be here. I think the excitement about the impending now less than 100 days to the election, I swear to God, it's like anything else. It's like we're all on native time, right? It's hurry up and wait and then hurry up and go, or SCO. So I'm incredibly excited about this election, and we're so thankful to have organizational partners that have Dr. Payment and Executive Director Wright and really Indian country. But we all know as we come upon 100 years of the Indian Citizenship Act and how critical this vote is to us and to the ancestors who made so many sacrifices for us to continue to participate in this democracy. Especially because we're not just race-based, we're politically based, and there's a lot of ways to flex our political prowess, and there's a lot of ways to exercise our sovereignty and strengthen it. And it really starts at the polls, and it really engages all of our regions. And so it really is going to take all of us. I sincerely appreciate the Broken Promises report and other materials, but this is one of the most important elections for so many reasons. And so I think it's going to be a unified endeavor in how we do that. And as Dr. Payment had expressed, it's not partisan based. And for us, it's not about the next election, it's about the next generation. And we have to do whatever we have to do, not only to be forward thinking and forward focused, but we also have to remind ourselves of how far we've come as Indigenous people and inherent people of this land. So I'm incredibly excited to be on this call today and to hear all of you and to make sure that we continue to support one another. And as Executive Director Wright said, and Aaron, there are going to be a lot of materials. I just beta tested what it was. So if I'm looking at it correctly, Aaron and Larry, you have to submit your information under that nativevote.org, and then I would assume you'll get another follow-up email to prompt you on how you apply for those mini grants that Larry just talked about how you can do that. I know in Wisconsin that we work collectively because we understand the strength in numbers. We recently had a tailgate in partnership with the Wisconsin Conservation Native Org. And we're doing a lot of things collectively, understanding that each tribe is not monolithic. It's unique in its own right, but understanding there are universal issues that we are all facing at this time and critical challenges that we have to face, especially knowing that I also sit on, I'm a co-chair of VAWA Task Force now for several years, and we know that it most recently was reauthorized in 2023, but we have to think beyond reauthorization of VAWA and bringing public health and safety to our tribal communities, understanding that murder is the third leading cause of death of Native women. So there is so much work that we have to do, and it's going to take all of us. And most importantly, use those toolkits and create a value proposition, create a voting plan, and make sure you get your citizens engaged and help them create or dispel any challenges they might have in creating a plan for voting and inviting friends and making it fun and being excited about what is before us. So whatever I can do to assist, I'm happy to do so. We've engaged collectively. We had a tailgate with over 1,000 people at the Milwaukee Brewery Stadium. Most recently, it was really fun. We honored our veterans. We had color guard. We had a lot of fun. And there are so many other activities that are being planned in various tribal communities collectively. It's not just for that tribal community. Other tribal leaders are going into other tribal communities to assist too, because it is a heavy lift and it requires all of us. So whatever I can do to assist any of you in to getting out the vote and SCO voting, let's do this and let's make sure that we are represented and that our voices are heard. So Anishik, Chairman.
Sorry, I was muted. Awesome. I knew that you would get us energized. And we are joined also by our Regional Vice President, Leonard Feinday, for the Midwest. I'm sorry.
Yeah, bonjour. Thank you. I'm sorry that I was running late here. I had another meeting that ran long, but I just wanted to mention about some of the things that are happening in Minnesota. I thank you, President Holsley, for that great update on things that are happening in Wisconsin. In Minnesota, in 2018. We had one of the highest voter turnouts in Indian country in Minnesota in history. And that was when Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan were elected. And that level of excitement, I think, is mirrored in this election in 2024. So we're happy about some of the changes that the Secretary of State in Minnesota has made with regard to early voting and pop-up voting sites. A lot of the Indian country in Minnesota, of course, is in rural areas, and the way the state runs their elections is a lot of them are mail-in only precincts. And so we're working to make sure that there are drivers for the early voting sites to make sure that we're bringing people in to get out and vote early. And then in some of our larger tribal communities, we're also working with county agencies to put up pop-up polling sites as well. And we're excited about making sure that we have a very high voter turnout in 2024 here across Minnesota, but also across the Midwest and across the country. And I'm very thankful for NCAI and the investment and the work that they're doing in this regard. And I just want to encourage all the tribes to take advantage of the opportunities to organize and make sure that our people get out and vote. I do want to just mention one thing briefly about a conversation. Again, this is nonpartisan, but this is about Indian voting. Conversation I had with Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, where she talked about those 2018 election results and how, as she looked at the precinct level election results, she could basically see the borders of the reservation outlined based on, you know, who won those precincts. And I think it's really important and crucial for us to keep that in mind as we're moving forward, that our people, when we get out to vote, when we are organized, like, we shift elections. As has been stated, this 2024 election is a very critical election, and we need to make sure that our people get out and our voices are heard. So again, thanks to NCI. Thank you to Chairman Payment for the work that you guys are doing. And let's just make sure we're doing everything we can to get our people out. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Regional Vice President for the Midwest, Leonard. We do have a question. Larry, I think you're doing a response right now. And it's basically, you know, we have some situations in this country where we don't have federally recognized tribes in some states, and that's a tragedy. But there are Indian people in those states nonetheless, and they need our help just as much. And so I think the question was, how do we tap into potentially some of those resources? And Larry, do you want to give a response?
Yeah, I just typed the response, but this is part of the America 250, the celebration of the Declaration of Independence, and obviously that has a mixed meaning for Indian country, but NCAI is going to be a partner in that as they roll out this celebration for 2026. They have reached out to NCAI to make sure that they want to get all the voices of Indian country. And as we started those initial discussions, it made it very clear that as Dr. Payman said earlier, be careful what you ask for, because our story is very different in that lens, but they are open to that, and they're welcoming that, and they do want to hear that. So as we continue to work with them on that national level, and we'll continue to be an advocate to identify people in every state, natives in every state, to make sure our voices are heard. They want to do that, and we'll help facilitate that. But in respects to the election itself, I have been in contact with representatives from the Senate for Pennsylvania, asking for our assistance with this. And so we are following up to make sure that we do that. And again, the sovereignty ticket document that we will have here by next week and make available to everyone will also go a long way in that discussion.
And just add, if you go to the nativevote.org portal, the application process, it's broadly expansive and who's eligible for it. So if there's an excitement there and wanting to mobilize, you mentioned there's a real active Native community there, go ahead and apply, and let's see what NCI can do to help pull together some resources to help mobilize the Native vote. Pennsylvania is going to be very close. And so the Native people, that there may not be a federally recognized tribe there, but I'm sure there are federally recognized American Indians in that state that could make the difference. So maybe we can help.
Yeah, it is crucial, and we do encourage everyone to apply. And there's no guarantees on the amount that's being funded. We want to fund everybody that we possibly can, but it's also twofold: to show to the funders themselves what the need actually is. And so we want to continue to show that through our requests and through our conversations. We recently just received a $500,000 grant for this program, and we currently have several $1,000,000 that we have requested and are being considered. And I can't just say what has been approved yet that we haven't received, but we are very excited about the position that NCAI is in to be able to help all of our grassroots organizations.
All right, raise your hand if you want to jump in. We've got about 7 more minutes. We said we would start out with tribal leaders, but we can, anybody else that has a question or comment or ideas, or what do you need help with? Go ahead and raise your hand. We do have somebody who just raised her hand. And it's Frank Edwagijic.
Hello, I'm a executive director for the United Tribes of Michigan. And I know that we have a lot of Native citizens in the state of Michigan who are citizens of Canadian, they're citizens of Canadian First Nations, but they're residents of the United States and they're voters here. And I would think that reaching the folks that are in these urban centers, which would include, Detroit, Cleveland, and various other cities that are close by the border, there's a significant number of natives that would be good to be reached. And so often there are urban centers, I think, that would be good to make contact with to make sure that they have the same information and opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I went to the Frank Edwagijic School of Tribal Advocacy, and I am a graduate. We could, we can reach out to the American Indian Health and Family Services. My cousin Josette, Dr. French, is one of the medical directors there and has been for 25 years. And we probably can coordinate an activity there and get them to apply for one of the mini grants, and hopefully maybe put together some kind of an event that can mobilize Native people in that urban area. And then I know we have, I saw Levi Rickert, who lives over on the other side of the state in Grand Rapids. Levi, do you have any ideas how we could mobilize the Grand Rapids American Indian population?
Bonjour, everyone. Thank you for having this webinar. First of all, it's very important. And I guess I've been focused on nationally. I haven't thought a whole lot about the local community. However, Native News Online is going to conduct some focus groups on behalf of some of the projects we're working on with NCAI to really find out what some of the voting beliefs are in habits are as it relates to this election. So let me get with some of my people here in Grand Rapids and we'll figure out how to mobilize this group. So.
Hey, Levi, while we have you, I'm going to want to ask you to share any real detail, but the poll that you guys did previously showed some concerns on the Democrat side. And I know you guys are doing an updated poll now that there was a switch. But can you share anything about, some people might automatically think Native people are going to line up one way or the other, but can you share a little bit?
Yeah, I'll share this much, that we actually went to a third party. And the last couple of times we've done polls, it's been strictly our voters, or our readers, I should say, at Native News Online. This time we wanted to get a little more objective viewpoint of really what Native Americans across the country are. And so we went through a process, and there were some major concerns that Joe Biden actually was losing to Donald Trump during that. And we're supposed to be nonpartisan, so maybe I said that wrong, but when I say that, but really that's in response to your question. The Democrats really had every reason to be concerned, and the poll actually has been updated to include Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, and Robert Kennedy Jr.'s name's been taken off. Actually will start, I want to say Thursday or Friday this week, and when we get 1,000 people, we will be able to release those results sometime next week, hopefully. And I will add this: we added a question as it relates to what I heard last week at the Democratic National Convention at both caucuses, the Native American caucuses that I attended, basically people were saying a vote for Kamala, a vote for Tim is really a vote for Peggy to become the first female American Indian governor ever of a state. And so we added a question on that. And I was really triggered by Shawnee Chief Ben Barnes a couple of weeks ago, even about a week before Governor Walz was chosen to be Kamala Harris's running mate. He said, "You do know if that happens, every Native American in America will vote for the Democratic ticket." And so, I appreciate what he said in that regard. That we want to see Peggy Flanagan become the governor, but I'm not 100% sure every Native American, but we do have a question on, will that influence your vote? So I think that's good information we're seeking at this point.
Thank you, Levi. And I'm going to call on Neely. Before I do that, though, I just want to recognize, too, that in the work that Native News Online does, I also attended the Republican convention, and there's some funny stories involved in that one. So Levi can tell you someday. But let's go ahead, Neely.
Hi, I'm Neely, political editor for Native News Online, also direct descendant of Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians. Some of you may know my mother, Belinda Bardwell, but me and Levi have been working very diligently on this election. But I just kind of wanted to provide this question that was asked about how to engage Native people in urban centers. And you asked Levi specifically about his input about Grand Rapids. I'm also from the Grand Rapids area, but I currently live in Lansing, Michigan. But I was thinking, as a way to engage voters, Native voters in urban areas, specifically Grand Rapids, is a good way to do that is to partner with universities. Grand Valley State University has a good Native population there, a lot of Native youth, but also it's very diverse of the age range for Native people that attend that university. I mean, in Lansing, you have you have Michigan State, Ann Arbor, you have U of M and State. Should have Native people that attend those universities and work at those universities as well. I wonder if university and college partnerships is something you guys are kind of exploring as maybe an opportunity to engage that urban Native population.
I think it's a great idea. What I would say is that the TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, have a really active effort. If you want to check out the College Fund, American Indian College Fund website, they actually have a voter guide. They have a voter registration across all the states. Right now, I don't know of a concentrated effort at the universities for Native Americans, but I do know that TCUs are very engaged, and I'm sure that they would welcome input. And I know your mom, she's one of my longtime friends. It's hard to believe that she has a daughter that is that smart and engaged already. And her work with Grand Valley. So yeah, I think that's, whatever effort we want to pull together, we can do that.
And I think too, universities also do a lot of community programming as well. I know at Michigan State, which is where I just graduated from, all of our events were always well attended by community members that weren't students as well. So I figured that would be a good way to engage Native populations in the urban areas.
Yep. And I see he already left, but he did a welcoming earlier. Rory Wheeler is at the Indigenous Law and Policy at Michigan State working on his law degree. So maybe we could help Rory get something started over at Michigan State as well. Awesome. So we are 2 minutes over and we don't want to keep anybody. But if anybody has any final questions, if you want to raise your hand, maybe we could take another question or two real quick. All right. We see Nikki Leto, might be a Sioux Tribe member. Nikki.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey, Chuwashte, Nikki Leto in Makiapie, Mazawiya, Makiapie, Dakota. Good afternoon. Thank you for this informative webinar. I just wanted to sorry, my name is Nikki Lato. I'm from Prairie Island Indian Community, and my Dakota name is Mazawia or Iron Woman. I put two questions in the Q&A just because I was wondering if there's a list of Native voting organizations or campaign contact information, if our tribal members would like to contribute or support campaigns. And also if there's a list of candidates that are available who support Native issues.
Oh, that second question is a little more difficult. The first one, I know that we are intentionally working on pulling together a list and warehousing to make it easy at one-stop shop to know of all the different efforts across the country. NCI is working on that as a next step. But I don't know of like a Native Emily's list. I don't know if that exists.
Okay. And also, this is just a side comment. I was recently at a convention, and I know we're bipartisan here, but I was speaking with some of the legislators there on potentially, because when I was in one of the sessions, a bunch of tribal leaders were saying, you know, we want to vote for certain candidates, but we're unsure on, you know, how they work or what they do. And because I am from Minnesota in Prairie Island, I was able to give some insight on how we've had some dealings with certain candidates. So I just would encourage other tribes to, you know, speak with the tribal members and other tribes outside of your area to let them know how, you know, certain candidates are supportive of issues or initiatives and issues that you've dealt with, or also because there's a lot of, you know, Native candidates that I don't know of, but we'd love to support. But if there are tribes that have worked with them previously and had positive interactions, I'd like to know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to follow up real quick, and that really is part of our next steps in all this. There is a National Native Voting Rights Coalition that works together on voting issues, and we want to make sure that and as we ramp this up, that we have those contacts state by state, and groups that there's some groups that work in multiple states, but we want to make sure that you have the local contacts and people that are doing this kind of work. And as you can imagine, trying to see where every candidate that's running for office, both at the federal level, state level, and local level, is going to be a heavy lift to identify all of those that would support our Native issues, but a heavy lift that's worth it and needed. And these are some of the things where we're focused on this one right now, but this will be a continued discussion, as we know that every election's important. And especially when we talk about the presidential election, but being able to have this as a collaborative effort and create this database so that it's a one-stop for Indian country, that all of our advocacy groups can put their information here and have that contact directly. And so those are the next steps that we're going to be taking. And as I said earlier, this website, nativevote.org, is dynamic. We'll continue to add to it as information comes in. What you're asking, Nikki, great question, and one that we will definitely make sure that we continue to address.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we are out of time. We went over time. We appreciate the Midwest very much so, and our Southeast. And with that, we'll ask Larry if he can give us some closing comments.
No, I just want to thank everyone again for taking the time to be here today, and I applaud your efforts for being focused on this and knowing how important Get Out the Vote is, and how a difference that Indian country can make in the election, and understanding that it is a bipartisan effort. Yeah, we need to again identify candidates on both sides of the aisle that will advocate for us, and it's more important now than ever. And NCAI will continue to be a partner that Indian country can depend on, and be a platform so that we can elevate all of our collective voices. So thank you very much. I appreciate this. And as I said earlier as well, this is just the beginning of the conversation. If you have thoughts or ideas, questions after the webinar, please don't hesitate in reaching out, and we'll definitely follow up. Thank you very much. Gatega Wiblahon.
Thank you.
Miigwech, everyone.
Thank you.